right, so did I turn this on? I guess not. Start with the bell ringer here. Okay, got a little bit of vocab. Talk some information about Japan and their advancement and their imperialistic control, and why would they attack Pearl Harbor? What the heck? Why would they do it? So we'll talk about that more today. And then we'll have a presentation on Pearl Harbor, and then I'll show you a video, okay, of the movie Pearl Harbor. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. It's like a 4-minute video. It kind of puts in perspective of what it might look like and how it happened. Tomorrow I have perspectives of individuals that were actually, that are actually at the event and witnessed it, and I'll have you jot some of those perspectives down. And I think it's interesting hearing their thought, right, of the event and seeing exactly what they experienced and what they went through during that impactful, significant time, right? Terrible time for American history. One of the darkest days. Okay, so bell ringer for today. There you go. Detail what Hitler did to. Oh no, that's not it. Conflicts. There you go. Detail why Japan was militaristic at the start of the 1900s. Why would Japan look to expand their imperialistic empire? Why would they look to maybe attack the United States? There you go. I'll give you some time to work on that. We'll move on from there. So Japan, we're going to talk a little bit about them today. The Pacific. I'll have a map up ready to go for you probably next week. Sound good? Jeff, you got your current event ready for tomorrow then? Good? Good stuff. Sareed, how's it going?
Tired.
Tired?
Yeah.
I think I passed you last period. Schnoozing.
You're about to get me too.
What's up?
You're about to get me too.
No, I hope not. I was watching some old videos that Warner Bros. Put out during World War II, and I thought that was...
Really? I like this old cartoon they used to be.
Yeah, I don't think it would fly today.
No.
Not at all. Not at all. They were funny, though. I mean, I got a couple laughs out of it. Yeah. That was the time, though, right? That was the time. Were you up late last night?
Yeah.
Oh. What's late for you? No, what is late for you? Like how?
4 a.m.
What? Oh my gosh! What do you do?
I'm just awake, you know. In my face.
Heck, I almost woke up at that time today. Jeez. Oh. All right. So what do we have here for this bell ringer? Detail why Japan was militaristic at the start of the 1900s. Why would Japan look to expand their imperialistic empire? All right. So we talked about Japan earlier in the semester here and a little bit yesterday. Why is Japan militaristic? What happened with Japan that they became a strong militaristic power at the start of the 1900s? What occurred? What happened? Troy, do you remember?
US was betrayed.
Yeah, right. Okay, United States with gunboat diplomacy, right? Back in the 1860s, 1850s, and they opened up Japanese ports, okay? And they forced them to really trade with the United States. And this was en route for US to go to China to open up that open door policy, okay? At the same time, they kind of threatened Japan to open up with their gunboats, with their new and improved naval ships. And with that being said, Japan accepted, but they had to do what? What did Japan want from the United States in return? Jeffrey, you remember?
They wanted some of the gunboats.
All right, yeah. So they wanted to see how to build these naval ships, how to become an industrial nation, to become a Western modern society. Okay, so to incorporate industrialization into their country. All right, good. So that's kind of where we're at. And in the 1900s, they get in a war with Russia. With Russia in the early 1900s, and they whoop them up. They actually defeat them out in the open waters. So Japan defeats Russia in this war in the early 1900s, and they look like a strong naval power. And Russia is viewed as laughing stock of the rest of the world, especially in Europe. It's like, oh, you lost to an Asian country. That should never happen. Okay, never. So Japan's looking pretty strong. And then they go to war with China, which they expand into China. 2 different wars, but for the most part, it's over resources and land. And then they control the Korean Peninsula, moving into China, even all the way up into like where Mongolia is, Manchuria. Okay, and it looks like they're becoming a stronger power. Stronger power. We all know that Japan is what? What is Japan? Serena, what is Japan?
An empire.
An empire, but what are they? Like
Oh, an island.
an island, yeah. So they're limited to what then? Autumn, what are they limited to? Yeah, resources, right? Raw materials, especially to fuel their military, fuel their industrialization. Okay, they need sources of fuel, right? Okay, and we're going to talk today how maybe it's the United States' fault, I guess, for our causes to moving into this attack on Pearl Harbor. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit more on their side because of how aggressive they really were. Right? But there are some things that happened that pushed Japan to lead an attack like this, something that's really never been done before. I guess you could say the War of 1812, okay, an attack on American soil, okay, but for the most part, this is really the first large attack, right, on American soil. So, we all know that Japan, looking for resources and raw materials, expand their military, expand their industrialization. They need to. They're an island. They're limited to what resources and raw materials they have. Is there any questions on that? We good? Okay. So before we get to that, I'm going to kind of start where we left off with Europe just for a short bit. Okay. We're going to stop right there, though. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about Japan, and then maybe we'll come back and forth from the European theater to the Pacific. So I'll let you know when we go jump frames, okay? Because I know it could be confusing at sometimes. All right. So terms for today. There's 3 of them, really. Yesterday, yeah, I had yesterday Pearl Harbor, so we're good with that. That's what we're going to talk about today mostly. But to kind of talk about the timeline here. Operation Barbarossa, Hideki Tojo, and Emperor Hirohito. So like I said, I'll come back to Barbarossa after I talk about Pearl Harbor and America's involvement. But for now, I want you to write that term down and describe it because it's important to where we're located on the timeline for World War II. All right, there we go. Write these terms down. I'll give you some time to look them up. Oh, there's one I wanted to add there too. Sorry. All right, so this term, just common embargo. I guess I should have put Pearl Harbor underneath, but it is what it is. I wanted to talk about Pearl Harbor yesterday, but building more up into it, I like you to include this term. So embargo. Embargo. So again, guys, use this as a study guide, right? So I really don't give out study guides too much, but this short answer, well, sorry, these vocab terms, the bell ringers, they are your study guide. It is what you put into it, really, and what you jot down in notes. So it's important to write these down. Obviously, I grade them too, give you points for it. And just use these as study tools, these bell ringers and vocab terms. All right, so Operation Barbarossa, what is that? What is that? Jeffrey, what do you have for that, buddy?
Operation Barbarossa was the code for Nazi Germany to invade Soviet Union.
Yeah, good job. So after the Battle of Britain, okay, we talked about that a lot with the Blitz, right? Hitler decides, well, Great Britain's not a threat. They're stuck on that island. We're going to continue to have bombing runs over top of the island, destroy some of their cities and civilian centers, but we're going to focus our attention now on the Soviet Union in the East. So that non-aggression pact that they had established in 1939 when they took over Poland, that's not going to last too long, right? Obviously, in 41, that changes. And Hitler decides to attack the Soviet Union. Why would he do that? Why would he attack the Soviet Union? He had that non-aggression pact with them. What was the reasons for it, you think? Why would he attack the Soviet Union? Shereen, what do you think, buddy?
Because he knew that in a couple of years the Soviet Union would be able to actually better defend themselves, maybe even invade them.
Yeah, good job, right? So he saw the power that the Soviet Union was becoming, right? He saw the military that they were building under these 5-year plans that we discussed and went over, how strong their military was becoming. And another reason was, Troy, you had your hand up too. What were you going to say?
More living space.
Yeah, living space, Lebensraum, right? Okay, that was another reason why. And we all know, who did he blame for the Treaty of Versailles and Germany's depression? We know Jews, right? But who else? Griffin? Communists. Yep, good job. Good job. So you view these people as Jewish communists that tried to pit Germany into this depression and viewed them as this rival of the Aryan race, right? And he viewed them as pretty much the enemies of Germany's Aryan race, okay? So yeah, he viewed them as the real villain, the real enemy. Okay, after France was taken care of, after Great Britain, they didn't fully take them over, but they pretty much have them landlocked on that island. Okay, he decided, well, we might as well go after the Soviet Union right now. Okay, blitzkrieg tactics were working pretty well. Moved far, okay, and wide with this tactic. And that being said, why not go after the true enemy of Germany, Soviet Union? All right, good. So again, we'll refer back to that after I talk more about the specific theater and kind of setting the stage for that. Hideki Tojo. I don't know if I had this term before. I might have. Who is he? Who is he? Lentz, what do you got?
Well, he was a Japanese politician and general of the Imperial Japanese Army. He served as Prime Minister and President of the Imperial Rule.
Good job. So Hideki Tojo was really the leader, okay, the person calling the shots for the military in Japan. All right. So he wasn't the emperor or anything like that, but he was really the guy calling the shots. When they talk about some of the brutality of World War II, especially out in the Pacific, he's the man to blame. Okay, he was the person pushing this imperialistic Japanese empire here. Okay, all right, Emperor Hirohito. So this kind of gives it away a little bit. Gracie, what do you have for Emperor Hirohito?
He was the 124th emperor of Japan according to the traditional order of succession. He ruled from 1926 to 1947.
Good job, right? So Hirohito, he was the emperor of Japan during this time of World War II. Right? He actually lived up until like the 1980s. He lived a long life, and yep, he was the emperor, and he charged Hideki Tojo to expand the imperialistic Japan, their military. So yeah, I guess you could say he was kind of to blame for some of the things that they've done, but for the most part, it was more Hideki Tojo. Okay, good, and then finally embargo. What is embargo? Griffin?
Official ban on trade or other commercial activity.
Yeah, good job. Good job. So this is a ban on trade, specific items, right? Okay, we'll talk about that today. And actually, we'll lead right into it. So embargo is really this sanction placed on another country, specifically on trade. Okay. And as Japan's expanding out here in the Pacific, like I mentioned, they're up into parts of the Soviet Union at that time. They're up into Mongolia. They're up into China here. The Korean Peninsula is totally controlled by Japan, right? They're down here in the modern day Vietnam, which was French. And we'll talk about it. The Philippines here soon. Now it's really going to push the United States head over heels in this war to a point where they need to do something drastically and quick, right? So, with that being said, as Japan's expanding, what was the United States' stance on trading with these belligerent countries? What was those acts called? Do you remember? The 1930s? Troy? Yeah, the Neutrality Act. Good job. So, it's pretty much the same thing here. Right? These Neutrality Acts were designed and created to prevent the United States from getting involved in the World War II, especially in the European theater. Okay, we know in World War I, that was one of the main things that pushed the U.S. into this war. As we're trading to both sides, as we're getting involved with giving them supplies and armaments, not just the Allied powers, but the Central powers as well. Okay, this is going to draw the U.S. into this war. I know U.S. is going through this depression. It's like, oh, well, this is something that we maybe should get involved in, right? We should try to maybe trade and help our country out through this depression. This is only going to create jobs. But Congress had a firm belief that if we do start trading and giving supplies to these militaries and these countries all across the world, eventually the U.S. will get involved. And Congress had a firm stance. Isolationism, okay? Isolation. All right, but the same thing here. Japan, our once ally in World War I. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Wait, we were allied with Japan in World War I. We were. Okay, Japan was taking care of some of these territories that Germany had acquired in the Pacific, okay, out here in Asia. And they were really taking it to them in World War I. But that changes pretty quick. And as Japan's becoming more imperialistic, all right, one of the reasons why they were is because they faced the Depression as well. You know how we talked about that depression in Europe and really all across the world? Japan felt it as well. Okay. As these countries like the United States, their economy dropped, it crashed. So did Japan's. Why? Because we were a trading partner with them. We were allied with them for quite a bit of time, since the mid 1800s. And once we go through depression, so did they. So what did this kind of result for Japan? What did they have to do? Could they depend on other countries to help benefit them? No, Gracie, yeah. So they had to expand, right? They had to try to focus on themselves. And this is how we see more of an imperialistic Japan, okay? And how they're taking over these territories and lands and areas all throughout the Pacific. So as they're expanding, as they're becoming more dominant in the Pacific, the United States decides to do something that pushes Japan to really end this alliance with the US. And this is just an embargo on oil. So write that down, guys. All right, an embargo on oil. So that means they're going to stop trading with Japan, stop giving them oil, natural gas. And we all know Japan's a what? Lent? What is Japan? An island, right? So they needed oil. They needed natural gas to try to fuel their military and really inspire more industrialization in their land and their territories. So once the U.S. cut off this oil, this gas and this fuel for them to continue to grow, this obviously angered them. Okay, this obviously angered them. It just looked and seemed to be that Japan wouldn't stop their imperialistic expansion. So the U.S. really had no other choice. Okay, we can't continue to aid these belligerent countries, these aggressive countries. If we do, then that's going to drag us into this war. Unfortunately, once we did enact this embargo, what happened? War, right? An attack. And that attack is Pearl Harbor. Okay. So in a way, I guess you could say this embargo on oil against Japan led to Pearl Harbor. Okay, they're angered. They were furious about losing this resource that the U.S. was supplying to them. And it's almost like a child trying to be defiant. And once you smack their hand when they're trying to grab something, when they're trying to grab a toy or something, they're gonna act out violently, right? That's kind of what that's what happened. All right, is there any questions on that? You good? Okay, moving on here, real quick with Pearl Harbor. I want to show you this video. Give me enough time to do that. So like I mentioned, with that embargo, that didn't help nothing. That didn't help anything. Okay, but when we're looking at the scope of things in 1942, I mentioned this already with Operation Barbarossa, and June 1941, Germany decides, well, we're going to aim all of our attention at the Soviet Union. Okay, they're our real enemies. They're the Jewish communists that are going to try to take down this Aryan race, this Aryan culture that Germany had established. So that's where we're going to end right there. We'll pick back up there. Don't worry. Okay, we'll get back to it once I discuss a little bit more about Pearl Harbor and the Pacific Theater. But that's where we're going to end right now. So Germany looks towards the Soviet Union. And why do they do that? Well, because Great Britain's that only country yet as an allied power in Europe, and they're really resorted back to their island. Hitler doesn't see them as a threat no longer. He's going to continue his bombing runs, try to destroy as much as possible there in England, and just focus most of his army, all of his attention at the Soviet Union. All right, so with this embargo, okay, as Japan's becoming more imperialistic and hatred building with that as well, Japan decides to step out, okay, try to gain more resources as well, because they're really angered by this embargo, by the sanction that the U.S. placed on them, that they're no longer supplied with oil and natural gas to continue to keep on expanding. So Japan is forced, I guess you could say, for this surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. So Pearl Harbor, we know it's located in Hawaii, U.S. Navy base in the Pacific, December 7th, 1941. Make sure you remember that date. So December 7th, 1941, that's when it happened. That's when it happened. So Japan sends 6 aircraft carriers, 360 planes, battleships, cruisers, submarines, you name it, to surprise attack the U.S. Navy base. And this is what leads the U.S. to get involved. Okay, this is one of the largest, if not the largest, attacks on American soil. Okay, I guess 1812, War of 1812 was very devastating as well. But when you think about the devastation, the impact, the significance, Pearl Harbor really is it. I know too with 9/11. Okay, that was very significant, impactful, terrible time for American history. They're right up with each other. Okay, when it comes to military losses, okay, especially with the Pacific Fleet that we had, although the U.S. really wasn't built up too heavy with their military or Navy at the time, okay, they lost a lot of battleships. They were out for about 6 months until the U.S. could finally build back some of these battleships, aircraft carriers, you name it. But it was interesting. It happened in the early morning. Okay, it happened in the early morning. And as these Japanese planes are coming in, yes, there were some detections that maybe Japan was sending some, a crew of obviously a crew of airplanes over to try to bomb Pearl Harbor. But many people didn't believe it. It's like, there's no way they're going to fly all the way across the Pacific Ocean. Look how far it is, right? There's no way. Okay, but Japan actually had some military bases out towards the mid-Pacific Ocean. Okay, and with this attack, it happened in the early morning, and many people that were at the military base, people that were in, obviously close to Pearl Harbor, they thought it was just a flying run, just a training exercise. Okay, because that would happen often there at Pearl Harbor. Many of the planes would just fly off, do training exercises, bombing runs on smaller islands right across close to where Hawaii, Pearl Harbor is. It was just American training exercises. So when these planes came flying in, people were just like, training exercise, no big deal. And all of a sudden, devastation. Okay, it was truly a surprise attack on many of these battleships here at Pearl Harbor. And you'll read about that tomorrow. I have a perspective, a primary source from the event where he had no clue. Many of the people had no clue. And they thought that the Japanese were actually invading the island, okay, and troops were going to follow. There was so much fear and speculation in the air. They had no idea what could happen next, okay? And this date, obviously, what FDR says will live in infamy, right? No one should forget about this date, December 7th, 1941, and that's what pushes the U.S. into World War II. The next day, well, here's some pictures of it. So here's some pictures of Pearl Harbor. Obviously, the devastation of the battleships and the destruction, okay, and how this was so impactful for many Americans. Once they see this happening, it's unbelievable for many. And there's only one resort for this is getting involved. Isolationists no longer, right, getting involved. Like I said before, many of these people that were seeing these planes fly over, like, it's just a training exercise, no big deal. Then they saw the red circle. That's how it indicates Japan's, I guess you could say, symbol or emblem. It's on their flag. And it was truly a surprise attack. Many people say, we knew it was coming. This was just to push us more into World War II. I mean, when you think of the devastation and the impact of it, I don't think it really was. Okay? And many people said, Great Britain knew that this attack was going to happen. They just let it happen so that the U.S. would get involved and help us out in Europe. Again, speculation. Okay? You really can't go by that. I really do think it was a surprise attack. We know with that embargo, with that lack of trade, I guess you could say, the cutting off of trade of oil and gas to Japan, that's kind of what pushed Japan more to attack us. All right, so the results, U.S. nearly 2,500 killed, 8 battleships damaged, 3 destroyers unusable, 160 aircraft destroyed, 128 aircraft damaged, entire fleet out in 6 months. So there was total devastation. That's one of the places I really want to go out and see some of the the things that they have out there. And you can actually go on the one part and look over. I think it's the Arizona, I believe, and view it. There's just glass in the water. You can see exactly down into the battleship, and there's still oil kind of leaking out of it still today, which is interesting. It shows how well equipped these battleships really were. obviously the people that lost their lives there is truly, I'm sure, breathtaking. There's also a perspective of a Japanese pilot that you'll read about tomorrow, and that's interesting as well. That's interesting as well. So once this attack happened, Japan thought, well, America's crippled. We took out their whole fleet, just like that. No problem. There's no way they're going to be able to expand their military, create these naval ships to challenge us out here in the Pacific, and at the same time, stop Germany out in the European theater. But we totally surprised, and that's for sure. As actually quoted, we woke the sleeping giant. Okay, that's really what the United States was. How the United States could just form this military power to fight in two different theaters was amazing. And we can thank our industrial power, industrial economy for that. We went through that depression for a long time, but the factories, the businesses were still there that we could shift to total creation of war supplies and armaments. And it was amazing what we could produce compared to the rest of the world. All right, so next day, U.S. declares war. So December 8th, 1941, the United States declares war, and Japan and Germany would then declare war on the U.S. So we get involved in both theaters. And there's a quote there by FDR, Franklin Roosevelt. December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. These signs that we're getting involved, Congress approves of it. Okay, and World War II starts for America. All right, so I want to show this video for you. It's the movie Pearl Harbor. It shows the attack on it and kind of brings it into light, into detail of what actually went on, and the experience there with the battle. All right, so I'll play that right now. I think you'll enjoy it.